This workshop, I'm going to show you the basics of doing some of the fundamental things we can do in InDesign to lay out a quick little booklet, create page numbers, add images, add text, and sort of cover the things that we need to do the bulk of the time in InDesign. For this workshop, I've got some images that I've just downloaded here. They're all coffee themed, because why not? But I've gotten these from a website called Unsplash. You guys can feel free to use this site to find high quality, high res images on whatever sort of theme you need, or ideally you should be working with your own images. So just for this purpose of today's workshop, that's where I got those images from. Now when InDesign opens up, the whole reason why I'm using InDesign is that in InDesign I can create multiple page layouts, I can create pages that would dictate what happens on the other pages, and also too I can really quickly do a load of different work that will lay everything out, that will give the sense of what my publication is going to be, whether it's a book or a magazine or a concertina or a zine. The reason I'm using InDesign instead of Photoshop or Illustrator is that it kind of marries both of the software together and allows me to have really high quality images that will be 300 dpi and have vector, as in vector-based images, whether it's logos or text, that's really sharp and crisp, and working between the two. And like I said, the other thing's about having sort of these template pages where I can lay lots of pages out, and I can create basically stencils for my other pages, especially if I'm doing a larger booklet. So I'm going to create a new file, and this is where I'm going to set up my booklet. Now at this point, I've got preview turned on here just so you can see what I'm laying out. With InDesign, when I'm laying out a booklet, what I want to consider is what type of booklet I'm making. So the first booklet I want to show you is a booklet that's folded and stapled in the center. Yeah? So that process of folding and stapling a page, an A4 sheet of paper, is called pagination. And if I'm working on an A4 sheet of paper, if I fold that in half, technically that A4 sheet of paper comes 4 sheets. So if I'm thinking about a booklet that's going to be folded and stapled like that, I always want to work in multiples of 4 because every single page is technically 4 sheets. So if I work and I've only got 11 pages, I'm going to have my last page be be white. So I need to sort of think of what it's going to look like in the context of my entire book. So I want to make sure that when I'm doing my pages, if that's the way I'm going to print it out, I need to sort of always think, if I want to have this being like that, maybe this page is blank, maybe the back cover is blank, but always keeping in mind I want to work in multiples of 4, so I can have 4 pages, 8 pages, 12, 16, 20, 24, you get the gist, yeah? So over here is where I can add pages. By the way, in InDesign I can move pages around and I can add more pages later, but I'm just going to do a little 8-page booklet. So keep in mind that'd be 2 sheets of A4 paper folded and stapled. Now, how do I know what size it is? I'm going to go over to here where it says print at the top, and I'm going to say view all, and I'm going to say A5, because if I fold an A4 sheet of paper, I get an A5. We don't have this in America when we do our pages. We don't have this lovely A system. This works really well. So A5 is half of an A4. So I've got 4 pages on my A4 sheet of paper. If I do A5, I'm going to change my pages back to being 8 because I forgot about that. Actually, I'll do 12. Why not? Start page 1. Sometimes if you're using books, you'll do something different with that, but that's for a different tutorial. Also, too, InDesign's been defaulting to units of picas, and honestly, I can't imagine what picas are, and I can't measure that out. So I'm going to switch my units here to millimeters, because I can think in millimeters, but I can't think in picas, yeah? So this is just a measurement I can work with, or you can switch that to inches or centimeters, whatever unit is what you work best in. Then, over here, I can kind of see that's my page there. Now, I've got my columns. I can always add columns in a second, and I'll show you how to do that inside of the document. Then we have margins. Margins are these pink and purple lines there. Now, the margin is set in very far if we're thinking about this being an A5 sheet of paper. The purpose of a margin is just making sure our text is safe. And right now, with this margin being that far in, actually I'm losing a lot of the space for my design. So I'm going to change that from being 6 millimeters, 12 millimeters down to 6. Now, here you can unlock the margin. So for example, if I was going to do like a Japanese stab binding, or if I was going to spiral bind this in the end, I might want to have a thicker inside margin, yeah? Just to make sure my text didn't get cut off. So you can custom these so that the inside or the outside or the bottom of the pages, depending on what you're doing in your design project, can be either linked or unlinked right there. The other options we have down here is our bleed and our slug. This comes from old terms from printmaking, but generally the bleed is, if you ever used a printing press, it's the bit where the ink oozes out on the side, and that's called the bleed. And basically when we're sending things to print, the printer doesn't print all the way to the edge of the paper. So if we want things actually like full color pages, we need to print on a slightly larger medium and print to the bleed so that we can trim away and have a nice full sheet of color. So I'm going to add a 3mm bleed because I'd like to have a full color page. And you see the bleed ends up being this red line on the outside. The slug is something you probably won't need right now at UCA. If you're sending things to printers, the slug is outside of the bleed, and that's basically a note to a print house or something like that about what the document is and who's the document for and the print material and all that. So the printer just has information about this publication, especially if it's going off to a big house like Blurb or something like that. They might say, could you please put your contact information in the bleed, outside of the slug, past the bleed. And that's just basically how you'd set that up. But basically, now that I've done that, that's my booklet. I'm happy with that. I'm going to click Create. And over here on the Pages tab, I can see this here. I'm in the Essentials mode. This is like the new Essentials mode. If you're used to the old version of InDesign, you can always click up there to go to Essentials Classic. I'm going to work with the new Essentials mode because that's what a lot of you guys are working with now. But if you are using InDesign and you remember the way it used to look, and that's how you switch back to that. So basically all of my little tools are in these little 3 panels over here. This is how I sort of switch between properties, my pages, and my toolbox is over here on the left. Let me make this nice and full screen. So here's my InDesign document. I can see what page I'm on because it's over here in pages. This is blue. This takes me to my page. You see it's a whole bunch of white pages. Excellent. So I've got my booklet here. And on each one of these pages, do you see the letter A in the upper right hand corner? The letter A represents this is what the master page is. And we're going to use the master pages to give ourselves some page numbering right now. Because of course I could go on every page and add a page number, but honestly, especially if I'm doing a 100-page booklet, that's a bit of a pain, and I might move pages around, so I don't want to have to like renumber all of my pages. So to do this, I'm going to use the master pages, and the master pages also allow me to design my front and my back cover, because you see over here my front cover is up here on the right and my back cover is down here on the left. These being far apart makes it kind of difficult to design, and no, you can't move this one up to that one. It just doesn't work that way. So we can assign a new master page to be just the cover design. And then we can design this master page here for our page numbering. And then if any page we don't want to have the page number happening or any of those, I can add none to that. So over here, this is our normal pages, but up here, this is where our stencils are, our master pages belong. And to our master page, since everyone is A, I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to click this down here in the lower right next to the little trash can icon. There's a little square with a plus. Click that. And over here, you'll see now it's made a new one. Let me just move that down so you can see a little better. B master. Now this B master is now my cover. And I'm going to apply these two to that by just clicking and dragging and dropping it on that. Do you see how the letter B appeared? So now this one is being controlled by that. Boom. B there and B there. So now these are connected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little box. And I can always see what page I'm working on again up here. Whatever's blue is the page I'm on. So now if I go to this page, and over here on my toolbox, if I scroll down, there's one that just looks like a rectangle. I'm just going to make a rectangle that goes from one corner to the next across both spreads. And in the Properties tab over here, I want to change the fill. So I don't want it to have a stroke. I can always select none for no stroke. But my fill color, I'm going to double click on that. And I'm going to pick a color. Maybe not black. Maybe a nice sort of, ooh, that's very yellow. So we can adjust our colors by double clicking, and then we can find the color we want, and we can select a color that way. So now I've got this color that goes across those two pages. And if I click on my pages now, you'll see this page 1 is orange and this page 12 is orange. And if I double click on this page now, you can see there it is, it's orange. And if I go up here, it's orange. And if I go back to my pointer tool, I can't click on this page. When I'm working in master pages, I can't click and affect what happens in that page. So a master page, if I want to change this color or change anything about it, I need to double click and go back to Be Master to change something about this box. So if I wanted to change the properties to this now, and maybe I don't like that color, which if I'm honest, I really don't, I could adjust the color down this way. Maybe I want something that feels a little bit more coffee cream. Muddy that a little bit more. Okay. So that's how I can do colors one way. Yeah? And you can always adjust colors with this sort of CMYK balance over here. So this feels slightly more coffee colored. And you can mess with that to your heart's content. Yeah, and play with that till you're happy with it. So that's one way of doing colors, but a lot of times we don't want to just have a color. We'd like to have an image on the cover of our book. So one way of adding an image is I'm going to go to my Finder or in your thing and find whatever image you'd like to be the cover. What do I want to use? I'll use this. I'm just going to take this from my Finder. I'm going to drag and drop that into InDesign. And you see, if I did that, do you see how it just automatically filled this box? Because I clicked the box, it assumed that I wanted that to fill that, but I don't want to. So I'm going to undo. I'm going to hit Command and Z to undo. I'm going to try that one more time. This time I'm going to do it, I'm going to drag it into InDesign. But in InDesign now I'm going to click not on that box. Yeah? So I clicked away, and now it's sort of stuck on my mouse. And if I was to click and drag across, you see this little blue box appearing? That is my image. Voila. And in InDesign, when we place an image in InDesign, we're basically placing the image inside of a frame. You see this little circle that's appeared in the middle of my image as I hover over it. This image, if I click on it, I can then move around that. But you see how it's cropping my image, but that blue box is still there? I can change the size of that box to crop the image, or I can move the image inside of that box. But I'm going to hit Command Z twice now. If I wanted to scale my image, let me just put that back there. If I wanted to scale my image, if I wanted to make it smaller, what I want to do is I want to hold down the Command key as I'm hovering in the corner and the Shift, and that will scale both of them together. If I don't do that and I just make it smaller, it just crops it. Command Z to undo. And if I do this, that scales it so it's smaller. I think you notice as you hover over the page, you'll see some little smart guides and stuff appearing every now and then. That little pink line, did you see that? And if I go over the center of the page there, that little other pink line that shows up, that's letting me know it's perfectly centered in my page. Now, we saw one way of making color fills by selecting that little box there. But a lot of times with our fills, we want to work from an image. And on the toolbox over here, there's a color themes tool. This is a super helpful tool if you've already spent a lot of time planning out your colors in your image. If you click on the image, it's going to create a little color palette from that image. If you click down here, you'll see additional options. And then if I click on this box, it'll apply that color to the image. Yeah? I kind of like that blue. I think that, no, this blue. There we go. So I've got that image now, that color from my image, and the fact that I've pulled this color from the image makes the image feel more harmonious on that backdrop. And also too, on my image here, I can actually add a bit of a frame to it. So if I wanted to add a color frame, let's say I wanted to add just a little bit of a frame around that, maybe something a little bit darker. I hover over the edge. Do you see how there's a little box with a hole in it? box with the full color means that that's going to be the fill, but box with a hole means that's going to be a stroke. And over here for the properties for that, I'm going to go back to my pointer tool. By the way, the pointer tool is the letter V on your keyboard. If I click on this now, I can change the stroke. So I can increase how big the stroke is. I can change the corners in the property. So maybe I want to have a rounded corner, or I could say how rounded I want that corner to be. Some more subtly rounded. Yeah, so those are all things I can change. Now with the corner and the layout like this, if I hit the letter W on my keyboard, that's going to show me what it looks like when it prints out. And this is what's going to show me with all my guides. The letter W toggles between these two modes. And now if I go back to my pages, I can see there's my front cover on page B, 12 on 1, and my back cover on page B, 12. I don't know why I keep saying that, sorry. But if I go back to my B Master now, I could add additional design elements. So basically, InDesign is basically building with some simple shapes. So if I go to the rectangle tool, maybe I build a shape or a band of color or something like that that goes behind this. If I go back to my fill tool here, maybe pick another color from that color palette there. Maybe something a little bit lighter. And you see it's changing both of them. And if I don't want to change things, I might want to move things to different layers. And this will become more important the more complex your designs are, is do you have additional layers. And I want this to change this layer here. So I'll show you how to do layers in just a second. But here, I've got my shape here, and I want this one behind this one. There's two ways of doing it. One way is to select the thing I want in front and control click on it, or right click, and say arrange, bring to front. And that will move that ahead. Or the other way of doing it, if I go back to the properties, I want to turn that stroke off. Turning to 0 also gets rid of the stroke. The other way of doing it would be that these would be separate layers. And a lot of times when I'm working in InDesign, I work with additional layers so that I don't accidentally move things and I don't accidentally click the wrong thing. So to do that, I'm just going to move this down just a little bit. So I like the way it looks. It's got this lovely little band of color there. Maybe I want this just above that. And just below that. So now if I want to have this sort of banding across and I want this to kind of like, I don't want to accidentally move things, I'm going to add a new layer. To get to your layers panel, they're hidden in this new mode. So what I'm going to do is window, layers, and that will open that up there, yeah? And this allows me to add additional layers. So just like in Photoshop, I might have a background layer. I'm going to add a new one that says text. And I might have a new one that's like images, yeah? Name your layers. You'll thank yourself later, yeah? So I can move things on this, and I can also lock things on this. If I want to move things up a layer, I'm just going to cut that out from this layer. So if I want things moved from different layers, I'm just going to cut that out, and I'm going to paste that onto my images layer. And so that one will always be on top. Just like layers in Photoshop, whatever's on top is the layer that's on top. And I'm going to hover till I see my smart guides telling me that's centered. And then I'm going to lock my backgrounds layer because I don't want to keep moving that around. Now, I've got an image, I've got some shapes, but I probably want to add text because that's the whole purpose we're using InDesign. To add text, it's the type tool over here, and I'm going to be on my text layer, and I'm going to just click and drag out a text box. And you'll notice that this layer is now hidden because this layer is below the images layer. I can move layers around by pulling things around as well. Now that is super hard to read, so let me just change the fill on that to being like paper and change the size to be very large. And I'll change this to coffee. Yeah. Now defaultly in InDesign, all font starts off as Minion Pro. I don't know why. It just is. So over here in the properties, we can change our fonts, yeah? And we can change how it's aligned. So I'm gonna make this centered in my text box. And I'm gonna change the font to something other than Minion Pro. Now defaultly, probably not that one either. But defaultly, InDesign will open up whatever is installed on your computer, yeah? Now, with the font library, I can always find more, yeah? So I'm going to show you how to do that really quick, because picking fonts is important. You can click on some filters and you can decide to say what sort of things you'd like to look for. So maybe I want something that's a bit clean and chunky. And it's going to start limiting my search to things that kind of fit that, yeah? If I've got different line weight, this just creates selections for me of what that font's going to look like, yeah? And if there's a font I like, I can download this, because it's giving me a preview of it, because there's 16 fonts in that. And if I want to download this, I'm going to click this little cloud icon to activate it. And now if we go back to fonts, that should be there. I don't want Optima. And also to the selected text, which be what shows up in this. So, I'm going to just turn off the clear all. And you can see all of my fonts show up that way. But if I want to find the font I just downloaded, I can type that in too. I think it was this one. And then I can change the size of the lettering there to make it nice and big. I can change the leading, the space between letters, whether it's metrics or it's optical. Optical, did you see how that switched between optical and metrics? Optical is based on the curved shapes and the straight shapes, and then metrics is like doing a perfect amount between each one. And then I usually go for optical. It's a preference thing. I like optical when I'm doing it, but you don't have to. That's fine. Then over here, I can adjust additional things. If I click this little 3 dots, it gives me more options. I can tell it if I want everything to be all caps. So if you didn't write it in all caps, you can make it all caps. And then you can do small caps when you've got like the bigger and then the little ones. This works for some things. If you want like superscript, like if you want the third and the little RD to be littler, that does that. If you want like a little footnote, you can add underlines or strike throughs. You can change the width or the height of the font in here. Optically, it's not as nice as you think it is. Or you can pull it so it looks a little bit slanted. And yeah, that gives you all sorts of options there as well. So, I've got my font. I'm happy with that. You could also, if you want to, add effects to your type. So a little effects button there. If you wanted to like add a drop shadow. Sometimes if your text doesn't stick out against an image, that might help. Adding a bit of a drop shadow. If you click preview, it will show you what that looks like. And that automatically just gives you a bit of depth. You can adjust the angle of that drop shadow. You could do the distance. That is way too far away. More subtle if it's closer. More insane if it's far away. I don't know why you do that, but you can. You can adjust the opacity of that if you want a little bit less. You can even change the color to any color you want, really. You could add an inner shadow. An inner shadow makes it look like it's like cut out, like cut paper. You could do outer glow or not, inner glow or not. Bevel and emboss exist. Have fun trying to make that one look good. You could do satin or not. You could feather it, which works for other things better than this one, but usually don't feather text or directional feathers and things like that. So those are all things you can do to change your text to make it a little bit more dynamic. Then we're happy with that. That looks good. I've got my sort of cover of my book. Let's say on the other page I just want to have a bit of text. So over here I'm going to have the back blurb of my book, but of course I don't have my text yet. So I'm going to just quickly figure out what the heck font was that one. Acumen Pro Condensed. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say that this is Acumen, ACU. And I'm going to say this is Acumen Pro Extra Light. Keeping things simple, same font family, and just never use 12. And then I've set my size, and then I'm going to type fill with placeholder text. So it looks like I've got some text there. Excellent, I've got text. Now I've got my text here. It looks like I've got a bit of work going on. I might want to choose to split this into columns, so I might, you can add columns as well in text. By the way, the placeholder text is always just a bit of gibberish, but it's just the idea that you've got something that looks like text, yeah? You can add bullets and numbered list. All of that sort of stuff comes into here, and all of these sort of paragraph styles is where you have the most options as well. So with paragraph styles, you can save these things as well, and you can save these for later so that when it opens it up, it'll remember what you saved this paragraph is. So I'll save this for later in just a second when I'm done with it. I can also change how it lays out the paragraphs. Over here, once again, I've got the option to have all of my my paragraphs maybe trying to line up a little bit. I might want to have maybe a little bit of indentation at the beginning. I might want to have space between each paragraph. I might want to have maybe a little bit more indentation on either the left or right side, or space at the beginning, or a nice sort of big character at the beginning. Up to you. Just to show you that I could do all of that very quickly inside of this. So let's say this is basically how I'm going to do text for my entire document. Like, this is the text I'm going to use. I've spent a little bit more time than the 5 seconds I did right now, but I've done the text and I'm happy that this is going to be how I want my text laid out. For every other text I want to use this as my setup. I want to say that this is my text. So over here, I'm going to create this little plus icon here, new paragraph style, and I'm going to just call this body text. So this is the text for the body of my things. So every time I create a new text box, I want it to have this. And over here, for this, I'm going to call this my title text. I'm going to call it character style. I'm going to add a new one, and I'm going to call this title text. So, and I could set different ones for different things, depending on how complicated my document is. The worst thing you could do, and this is what separates the pros from the beginners, is that I'll see a lot of times students copying this and pasting it and then changing the text. This is the easier way of doing it, and particularly if you're working on your own machine, it's a fast way of remembering it as well. Now you'll notice over here in this text box, it's got a little funny little white square down here. When I see this little white square, it means that there's overset text, meaning that when I changed my paragraph style, there's text that I don't see because the text box isn't big enough. If I click on this, this sticks the text onto my mouse, and if I click, it pastes it again. Yeah. So that just means like the text isn't all fitting in this text box. The same thing would happen with this coffee one. If I was to shrink the size of this text box, you'll see my text has gone away because my text box isn't big enough for the font. So I need to basically either make the box bigger or move the text to a new text box. To do that, all you have to do is click, and then it gets stuck on your mouse, and then you can move this to a different page or whatever. But since this is my back page, I really don't want to have that text. So I'm just going to delete a bit of this because it doesn't really matter anyways. And if you've got like space at the bottom, you want more text, just type fill with placeholder text. It'll just fill it up. So it doesn't matter. Like I said, the purpose of this is just to give the feel that there's text in there. So I've got this. I'm happy with that. If I go back to my pages, I can see I've got my front and back cover designed. I haven't done this yet, but please do, and do often save file, save as, and I'm going to save it to my documents or on my desktop in my folder here, and I'll call this demo because it's clever like that. But basically you'll notice that I'm working with everything in one folder, and importantly at the end I'll show you how to package. But with InDesign, especially if you're moving around from machine to machine, you're going to need to have your fonts and your images in one place. Otherwise, when you print it out, your images are going to be like a little pixelated version of it. So really importantly, pay a little attention to that. So we've laid out our cover page, and we've applied that now to these two. Let's get to the body of what we're doing. So I'm going to go back to my A master now. And on my A master, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a guide and a grid, because really good design and what we aesthetically like is when things fit on a grid. So I'm going to go to layout, create guides. And when this is open, I can add some guides. So I can visually align, you'll see here, there it is, it's popped up, some little grids to align things to. Now right now, you'll notice there in this bright blue line here, there's a big space between them. This is the gutter. The gutter is the space between it. Depending on your design and how you lay things out, we usually use the gutter for when we're determining space between columns. And I can have my text aligned to the margins or the page, depending on your page layout and how you're printing. You might want to consider these. Yeah, so I'm going to add a couple more rows. And if you've got guides already, you can always click that and I'll remove them for you. And when you're happy with that, with whatever grid you feel like works for your layout and this type of work, some people really like a lot of grids. Yeah, maybe I'll do 4 columns just so you've got like a nice sort of center column. Yeah. Now that I've done that, my guides will now be on every page because all of my pages tie to the A master page, except they won't be on my front page. So if you want to create guides, remember guides can only be done on the master page unless you want to go through the trouble of doing it for each individual page. Yeah. And if I want to change my guides, I want to go back to the A master, and then I want to go to layout, create guides, remove existing guides, and then I can change that. Yeah. So I can once again add some rows, add some columns, and when I'm happy with that, I click OK. So there's my create guides on my master page. Now I'm going to unlock. Now over here on this one called text, I am going to add page numbers. Particularly when we're doing something like this, having this ability to work with different layers is going to be really important, because if I created my page number on my backgrounds and added images and stuff to it, my page number, I couldn't see it, it'd be covered, and I want to be able to see my page number. So I'm going to be in the text layer because it's my top layer. I'm going to go create a little text box over here like I just showed you. And to do a page number, I'm going to go type, insert special character, I'm going to go marker, current page number. And when I do this, I'm going to get my current page number. Keep in mind, I'm in my A master. So I get the letter A, which isn't a number, I'm aware. Yeah? So the letter A means that I'm on my page. My page right now is called my A master. So over here, this says the letter A. But actually, if I go to page 4 now and I double click, it has the number 4. Yeah? The current page number, because I created that in the A master, is always going to show a letter. And once again, I can go in here, I can go to my properties, I can change this to Acumen, do sort of condensed. And then I can adjust the layout, left aligned, all of that sort of stuff. I can align that there. And I'm going to put my text so it aligns at the bottom corner of my thing. And if I want it for the other page, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click, and I will make a copy. That's how you make copies in all Adobe programs. And then I'm just going to change the alignment to right aligned. And it's okay if both of them say the letter A for page numbering, because it's going to change, and both of these pages are basically numbered the letter A. So now if I go to my pages and I go to page 6 and 7, boom, 6, 7, awesome. Pages are numbered, I've got a grid, let's design some stuff. So I'm going to unlock my background layer now, and I'm going to select my background layer, and I'm going to just make some page colors. Yeah, why not? What's good? Going to that rectangle tool, dragging out a color, a box, going to my little eyedropper tool, finding my color theme one, and maybe a, ooh, I don't like that color. Maybe like a nice sort of off-white. Yeah, and properties, I'm gonna say none. Yeah, so now that page has a page color. Maybe over here, I'll do another full page color or double page color spread. Once again, clicking and dragging for the bleed. Excuse me, the bleed to the other page. Letting go. And picking a color from my palette. Maybe I'll go for this lovely sort of yellowy color. And turning the stroke down. Yeah, so now I can see on my pages here, I've got some things happening. I've got a couple of colors. I've got some things. Go to page 6 and 7. Command minus zooms out. Maybe I'll do another color over here on this side. And if I go here, once again, adding a quick color background. Yeah. And once again, because my background layer is at the bottom, my numbers are still on top. Excellent. That's what I want. So let's find some more images. So in InDesign, if I was to go back to my Finder, and let's say I select 4 images. Yeah. And I drag it into InDesign, and I'm just clicking into the gray here. You'll notice now on my mouse, my images are stuck. So if I now click and drag, I'm going to use my grid here to align my images so that they fill up, so that it fits something that fits with my grid. Excellent. I've got that there. Ooh, this coffee bean one, maybe I use this one as a full page one. And it's okay if it's going to be bigger than the grid. Yeah? Because I can just change that frame in just a minute. So maybe I want a page of just coffee beans, and maybe over here I want this image. And you notice that as I'm doing this, all of those images I imported now are sort of just stuck on my mouse, and they're in that order. So if I Command Z, if I don't want this one, I can hit Escape, and that will basically toss that aside. Yeah? So it allows me to have point control over where I place my images and how I do my layouts very quickly without a lot of work, which is great. Yeah? So I can place my images really quickly, and then when I've got them placed, if they're bigger than the grid, you're going to do some nice little designs and actually snap things to your grids, because aesthetically that's going to look nicer. Yeah? We like it when things fit a grid. Makes us happy. So I'm going to move this image over. And I was quite bad. I was working on my background layer, so work better than me and make sure that you switch. But I am sort of using these as background images. So I do want to make sure I pay attention to what layer I'm working on. Yeah, when I'm doing this. I held down the Shift key and Command when I did that to make that nice and large and fill the whole double page spread. And because that's on the, if I wanted this layer to be on top of the text, there's 2 ways of removing the image. So if I hit the letter W, you can see the page number is still there. And it looks kind of shit because it's like on top of it. Yeah, and it's hard to see. So if I don't want to have the page number there, I just want to make sure I can see it. See the page number there? I don't want to have that there because it doesn't look very nice. So if I want to get rid of the page number, I could always put this in the top layer of the text. So if I Command X and cut that out and I'm in the text layer, I paste that on top of that. That will hide that layer. You can kind of see you can't see it. Or if I Command Z and just move that back. On this layer, the other thing I could do is where it says none. If I drag that onto this page, that removes all of the guides and grids, and that makes it go away as well. So not every page needs to have a page number, but on the ones that you want them to have it on, it also makes your guides go away, which is a bit annoying. But you probably wouldn't want the guides on that page, if that makes sense, if you're doing that. So I'm going to remove the guides for that. And then I'm just going to make sure it's nice and centered on my page. So the other way of adding pages, if I hit W to go back to my page, the other way of adding images is I can actually create little frames for them to go in. So the shape tool here, this was how we did rectangles. And by the way, if you click and hold, you can get other shapes as well. But this one here with an X in it, these are frames. And if I click and make a frame, this is what the image goes into. That's the blue box. And if I click and drag out a frame, like that, I can find an image, and if I find an image and I click and drop into it and click that way, that places the image in my frame. Now if you notice here, the frame is really tiny and my image looks really blurry. The image looks really blurry because it's really big and I'm only seeing a tiny bit of it. So I'm going to control click and go fitting, fill frame proportionally, and voila, it should fit. And then I can then scale it up so it looks like holding down the shift key as I do so, and then I can just adjust its placement in the frame, or I can adjust the frame. I can add additional quick guides, multiple guides all together. So let's say if I'm creating these frames all together. So as I'm dragging out my frame here, if I use the arrow key, the right arrow key, I'm going to get a second frame that's right next to that. And if I use the up arrow key, that gives me a column. It's kind of hard to see on this one. Let me do this on a blank page where it's a little bit easier. I'm just going to apply none to page 5 there because it's super easy to see without that. As I'm dragging this out, there's one box, right arrow key, second column, up arrow key, another row, and then like that I can have images that are all going to be equally spaced. And if I hold down the shift, that gives me a perfect square. So if I want to have images that are quickly spaced and sort of fill up the whole page just like that, I could then align them or change the position of them. But basically this allows me to give me a really quick page layout. And now if I go back and I find 6 images from over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I drag and drop that into InDesign, they'll be stuck on my mouse, and I could click them into all of these. I can pick which one they go into. And then I could select all of them, so shift select all of them, and right click and say fitting, fill frame proportionally, and wait a second because my computer's being slow because I'm doing QuickTime and this at the same time. Voila, they all fill in there. And then of course you'd probably want to like move them around so it's cropped what I wanted to have, yeah? And it looks okay. Well, that doesn't, but you know, the idea. Now, let's say I want pictures to go across multiple frames that are all connected. Once again, I'm going to go that frame tool. I'm going to use a circle one this time. So there's my circle. Do the same thing with circles. Let's make a bunch. Let's make a couple of rows. And let's make them so they're all sort of scaled nicely. But let's say I want all of these to be connected. I want one image to go across all of these because this is going to be, I don't know, my design choice. I could delete a couple of these as well. So maybe I delete a few. So maybe I'm going to have some text or something going through the middle, but I want them all to be connected. So I'm going to select all of those images. Then I'm going to shift select these over here. Just give me 2 seconds. I'm going to shift select a bunch of these here. And as I'm shift selecting, I'm going to select all the ones that I want to connect. I want all of these connected because I want them all to be one frame, even though they're all a bunch of different frames. So I've shift selected all of them, and then I'm going to go to here, which is object at the top, and I'm going to say paths, paths, and I'm going to go to where it says make compound path. And when I click that, that's going to connect all of them. And you notice that how each one has a separate X. When I click this, Now do you see there's one big X? So that means my image is going to go across all of those now. So now if I find my image here and I drag and drop that, it's going to go across these two frames. And fitting, fill frame proportionally. It's going to try and fit into those. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you can. You make a better design choice. And I've hit the W, see that's done something very sort of similar, and that looks nice. I could also do the same with text. So let's go back to the text tool. And I'm going to select that text. I'm going to go to properties and I'm going to say character style, and I'm going to add title text, and I'm going to make that nice and sort of centered, and I don't know, much bigger. Much bigger. If you want it bigger, just type in like a value. And it's going to go out of the text box, so I need to make my text box larger. And I'm definitely going to change the spacing between my lines. I can do that over here. The little A there, see that? That's how I change the spacing between my lines. Because that looks bad. And I'm going to make the of smaller because it needs to be smaller. I think it looks silly when it's too big. So I'm going to make this like 170. And I'm going to add a space just to move the alignment over. Come on. There you go. So I've got my text there. Now, before you do this next thing, you need to be like happy with your text, because when I create outlines, I can't change that. If you're like me and I'm dyslexic, I'm a terrible speller. If you want to save it so you can see what the spelling is, and get underlines when things are spelt incorrectly, go to spelling, dynamic spelling, and that will like select things that are spelt incorrectly with the little red dot line. But always check your spelling before you do this next bit. Like, see that little green line? It's because I added a bunch of spaces, and it's like, did you want to do that? No. I don't want a capital O. No. So it's just making some suggestions there. But now I'm going to go type, and I want to say, I'm happy with this. I'm going to say, I want to create outlines into this because I'd like to put my image into the text. Yeah? And by the way, if you want your text wider or anything like that, this is your last chance to do that. Ultra black. Let's see. That's really nice and thick. Excellent. So I've got my text there. I'm happy with that style I want. I'm going to go type. And I'm going to say create outlines. Voila. And now you see how it looks different? It's because now it's 3 different shapes. And I'm going to select all 3 of them. I'll show you what happens if you don't do this. If you don't select all 3 of them and you add your image, it only filled the bottom one. So I need to select all 3. So I'm going to double click to go inside the group and select the top and the bottom and the last one, and then go object, paths. Oh, come on. Sometimes it's really fussy and it's annoyingly fussy. So I'm going to select the top 2. I'm going to say object, paths, make compound path. And then I'm going to select the last one and object, paths, make compound path. So now they're all one big one. And it's done an excellent job of filling in my O's. If you didn't want to do that, you could leave them separate. I'll show you how to do that in just a second, but I wanted it like this. So now I'm going to find my image, and I'm going to drag and drop that into that. Object, paths is all set. And I'm going to drop my image into there. And it should do each one together, but it's being really special. Because sometimes when you're doing a demo, it likes to be difficult. just gonna undo that just for a second. The other way of doing this, if it doesn't work, when you want it to go across 3, Command Z, is you could basically you could also do each one separately. So what I'm gonna do is go fitting, fill frame proportionally. Now see that one's filled it like that, and then these two are connected because it's being special, and then I can fill it as a separate frame there. Right click on it, fitting, fill frame proportionally, and then I can adjust where the image is and how that fits with my coffee beans. I don't know why you'd want to do this, but you can with this image. You can change the scale of it so it's smaller or larger. It's just always a panicky sort of thing of aligning it so it looks nice. And if I W, you can see what that looks like without the lines. For the next video, I am going to show you guys a little bit more about text and paragraph layout and creating a concertina. But the last thing I'm going to show you today is just quickly how to package what you've got here. And hopefully you guys have laid out a few things and done maybe a little bit more text boxes and stuff, but watching me design every element of a book is probably very boring. So what you're going to do is when you're happy with this, you're going to go File, Save, and save what you've done so far. And then you're going to File, Package, and basically what this is going to do, this is your organization best friend if you're not very good at being organized. Packaging is going to put all of your fonts and all of your images into a really nice clean folder, and it's going to create a PDF for you. So if I click this now, it's going to say, is this a folder name you want to do? And it's going to say, do you want to copy the fonts and all of this? Yes, I do. And it says include IDML. You want to include an IDML because if you go to a printer and they've got an older version of InDesign than you have, the IDML is something they can open up. So they can open up a newer version of InDesign if it's saved as an IDML file, and a PDF, it's going to save a PDF print all in the click of one button. I want to press OK, and it's going to do it for me. It's going to make everything nice and organized. Wait for it. So if you've worked on a machine and at the end of the day you want to keep working and you want to make sure you move this to a new machine and have everything on it, this is the best way to do it. And now if I go to InDesign and I go to the desktop, there's a folder in here called Demo Folder. In that folder, InDesign Workshop, and in here do you see Demo IDML, Demo InDesign? That's my project. Links, that's all of my links. It didn't save the fonts because they were Adobe fonts, but if I installed other fonts there'd be a folder called fonts. But all of the things I created, even though they might be in other places, got saved into this. And now I could easily move this folder, I'll move this out here just for a second, onto a USB stick as I go to a different place. Or a lot of times print houses will ask for you to package the file so they can open this up and print from InDesign, because InDesign will do what's called booklet printing, and I will save that as a separate video. Thank you very much, and I hope you guys found this helpful. In the next video, like I said, concertinas, a little bit more stuff with text and layout design.